If you love powerful emotional stories that will keep you up at night, subscribe right now and hit that notification bell. New stories every single week. Now let us get into this one. My name is Matilda Osei. I make music from a one-bedroom apartment in Koreatown, Los Angeles, and I have spent 2 years building something real from absolutely nothing. I am not famous yet, but I will be. My mother told me that every time I doubted myself, and I hold on to it carefully, the way you hold something fragile that also holds you up. My situation with Kwanju-chan is the most complicated thing in my life. More complicated than the industry. More complicated than grief. More complicated than anything I know how to name. Ju-chan is 34, Korean, and the most controlled human being I have ever encountered. CEO of the Kwan Group. A name spoken in certain rooms with a particular kind of quiet. The kind that means power, reach, and consequences no one wants to test. He is also the man who has called me every night at 10 for 4 months, without once telling me what I mean to him. We met at a private showcase in Koreatown. He owned the venue. I was performing 2 songs to 40 people. He stood at the back of the room, neck tattoos visible above his collar, black suit immaculate, watching me with the focused attention of someone making a permanent decision. After the show, he said 4 words. "You should record that." Then he left. No card, no number, nothing. White gardenias arrived Monday morning, no name. He called that night at exactly 10, and every night after. We were never defined, but we were never nothing. And on the night my cousin Kofi answered my phone, everything we had built in silence came violently undone. It was a Friday. Kofi had flown in from Accra without warning. That is very Kofi. He called from LAX at 7, announced he was staying a week, and I had no time to argue because I was deep in a session. By 9, he was stretched across my couch eating jollof he had somehow convinced the corner restaurant to make, watching football at a volume that suggested he owned my building. I was reviewing a track at my studio desk when my phone lit up on the kitchen counter. Ju-chan, 10 o'clock exactly. Kofi was closer. I held up one finger, don't. But he had already picked it up with the cheerful confidence of a man who has never once considered consequences. "Hello?" His voice, deep. Accra accent loose and comfortable. I watched the color drain from my own face in the studio monitor reflection. Silence on the line. Then Ju-chan's voice, cold and precise. "Is Matilda available?" Kofi leaned against the counter. "She's busy right now. Can I take a message?" The line went dead. I crossed the room and grabbed my phone. I called back immediately. 4 rings, voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted twice. Nothing. What I did not know, what I could not have known, was that at the exact moment I sat staring at my unanswered texts, Kwon Ju-chan was already directing his driver to Koreatown. He parked outside my building at midnight. He turned the engine off. He did not come upstairs. And while he sat in that car watching my window in the dark, someone 3 miles away was breaking into his penthouse, using his jealousy as the key. Mrs. Oil Park from the 2nd floor texted me at 6 the next morning. "Matilda. Expensive car outside since midnight. Man inside has not moved. I am concerned." I put on a hoodie over my pajamas and went downstairs barefoot. The black SUV sat directly across the street. Tinted windows. Engine off. As I pushed through the front door, the car door opened and Ju-chan stepped out. Last night's suit. The jacket wrinkled in a way I had never once seen on him. Eyes carrying the particular weight of a man who had not slept and had spent the hours thinking about things that hurt. We stood facing each other across the quiet morning street. "You sat out here all night," I said. He said nothing. "Ju-chan, it was my cousin Kofi. He flew in from Accra yesterday. He picked up my phone without asking because that is what Kofi does to everything in his path." Something moved behind his eyes. Not relief, not yet. More like a wall dissolving slowly, and a man uncertain how to feel about the sudden exposure. "Your cousin," he said. "Yes, 6 feet tall. Eats everything in my fridge. Answers phones that are not his." The silence stretched between us, loaded with everything we had never said out loud. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. Every trace of what had been visible and the jealousy, the exhaustion, the rare unguarded look, locked away in 1 second. He answered. His voice flattened completely. What happened? I watched his jaw tighten, his eyes go cold and sharp. He looked at me once more, something strange and heavy in his expression, and said, "My penthouse was broken into last night, while I was sitting here." He said it plainly, the way Juchan stated everything dangerous, without drama, as though the world being dangerous was simply weather. They took files, financial records, the kind that, in the wrong hands, cost people their lives. He looked at me for a long moment. Your cousin being here, his voice on your phone. It is the reason I was not in that building last night. He let that land. Then he got in the car and it pulled away. I stood on the pavement in my pajamas, watching the SUV disappear around the corner, turning over what he had just told me. His jealousy, this thing that had looked so much like pride and possessiveness, had kept him alive. Now I need to pause and ask you something. A man sits outside your door all night out of jealousy, and that same jealousy accidentally saves his life. Is that fate? Or is it something bigger? Tell me in the comments. I need to know what you think, and make sure you hit that like button. Now let's keep going. The week that followed, I buried myself in work. A music executive named Devin Price had been circling my career for months. Devin was smooth, connected, and knew exactly what to say about a voice like mine. He offered me a production deal, studio access, distribution, songwriting collaboration, the kind of offer unsigned artists dream about. My manager Tasha nearly screamed. We met Devin at his studio on a Thursday. Platinum records, perfect lighting. He stood a little too close at the mixing board. You know, his hand landed on the small of my back one too many times. And then, over coffee, almost casually, "You need to be careful about the company you keep, Matilda. Certain associations complicate how this industry receives you." He looked directly at me when he said it. I kept my face still, but I remembered every word. What I did not know was that Juchan had been investigating Devin Price for 5 days. His team had already found the buried contract clauses: ownership rights to any music created during the partnership period, exclusivity terms preventing me from working with anyone else for 4 years without Devin's written approval. 2 female artists had signed identical agreements. One spent 16 months in litigation trying to reclaim her own songs. The other walked away and forfeited her entire debut catalog rather than keep fighting. Both women had been isolated. Both had been told their current teams were not good enough. Both had ended up professionally dependent on a man who controlled everything. Juchan's team found something else. Devin Price had financial ties to the same group that had ordered the break-in at Juchan's penthouse. His father's former associates, the men Juchan had spent 6 years quietly working to dismantle from the inside, had sent Devin to neutralize the one thing they suspected could soften Juchan's focus. Me. They had identified what Juchan could not yet say out loud, and they had sent someone to either exploit it or destroy it before Juchan could protect it. Juchan compiled everything: the contracts, the testimonies, the connection to his father's network. He put it in a folder and delivered it to Tasha in person at a coffee shop in Silver Lake without telling her his name. He told her to show me everything. He told her not to say where it came from. Tasha called me that Saturday morning with a folder in her hands and an expression that told me the world had just become more complicated. She told me everything. Then she told me exactly where it came from. I went to Devin's studio on Tuesday with Tasha and the folder. I set it on the table between us. I told him I would not be signing. He tried charm, then flattery. When both failed, he leaned forward and said the thing that told me exactly who he was. "You think that Korean gangster is protecting you? You are the cleanest thing in his dirty world, Matilda. He is using you as cover. Men like him do not fall in love. They collect." I stood up. I looked at him steadily and I said, "Men like you decide what women like me are worth. You do it early before we can decide for ourselves, so that by the time we realize it, we already believe you." I have been making music since I was 14 years old. In my bedroom, in bathrooms, on my phone's voice memo app, in sessions I drove 3 hours to attend for free because I believed in what I was building. Nobody handed me this voice. Nobody handed me this career. And nobody, especially not you, is going to make me believe I need permission to be here. I walked out. Tasha followed, barely containing herself. Devin sat alone in his expensive studio, and 2 days later, 2 days. Both artists who had lost their music to him agreed to speak publicly. Connected by the same entertainment attorney, reached through the same channel Juchan had quietly activated from a distance. The industry did not know what was coming. Neither did I. That evening, I drove to Juchan's hotel in Koreatown. I took the elevator to his floor. I knocked on his door with the folder in my hand and everything I needed to say, sitting right at the surface, ready. He opened the door in a plain white shirt and dark trousers. No suit, no armor. He looked like a man who had been awake too long, carrying things he had never learned to put down. I held up the folder. You did this. Tasha was not supposed to. She told me. I'm glad she did. I walked in. Juchan, you investigated Devin. You compiled all of this. You delivered it personally and told her not to say your name. The same way you come to my shows and stand at the back and leave before I can find you. The same way you send flowers without a card. The same way you spent 8 hours in a parked car in the dark rather than simply ring my buzzer. The city blazed through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. You protect me from every direction except the one thing I actually need. The truth. Say it. Not through folders, not through flowers, not through sitting in cars. Say the real thing, right now. He was still for a long time. Then he said, the men who broke into my penthouse. They are connected to my father's network. I have spent 6 years from the inside quietly dismantling everything my father built. Feeding evidence, restructuring the legal foundation of the Quan name, moving it towards something clean, something that does not require silence to survive. He looked at me. They sent Devin to reach you because they identified what I have not been able to say out loud. That you are the reason I want to finish what I started. The reason clean means something to me now. The room held that. I waited. 3 days later, a photograph appeared under my apartment door. Me leaving Juchan's hotel the night I confronted him. 3 words beneath it. Back away. Now. I called him. He answered on the first ring. I know, Victor is already moving. Who sent it? My father's former people. You matter to me. That makes you leverage. I sat down slowly on my kitchen floor. Kofi came in, looked at me, and sat beside me without asking questions. He put his arm around my shoulder the way he used to when we were children, and something frightened me. Matilda? Juchan's voice stripped of every wall. I am not asking you to stay in this. This is not what you agreed to. You should not have photographs slid under your door because of me. Juchan, but I need you to hear something before you decide anything. A long pause. I have been careful for 6 years. My words, my associations, every single thing calculated and controlled. Then I met you, and I have not been careful about a single thing since. Because you are not a liability to manage. You are the first person who has ever made me want to be known instead of feared. I closed my eyes. Kofi's arm tightened around my shoulder. Sometimes all it takes is someone sitting beside you quietly while you make the hardest decision you've ever made. I made mine. Handle your enemies, Juchan, I said. I am not going anywhere. The silence on the line was the longest and the most honest thing he had ever given me. I will handle them, he said, and when it is done, I will say everything I should have said 4 months ago. I held him to that. 2 weeks later, it was over. The federal case Juchan had been quietly building for 6 years closed. His father's former network dismantled. The men who had ordered the break-in and slid photographs under my door no longer had anywhere to reach from. Devin Price's contracts went public through an industry journalist on a Thursday. By the weekend, both artists had their music back. Devin's label collapsed within a month, but my debut EP released on a Friday. By Sunday, the third track was climbing every platform. Tasha hired an assistant, then 2 more. I performed at a rooftop event in Silver Lake on a warm Saturday evening. 200 people. Kofi in the front row in a Lagos jersey making enough noise for an entire section and not caring at all. And Juchan, not at the back, not in a corner, not watching from across the street with his headlights off. Front row, right beside Kofi. Black suit, hands folded, eyes only on me. When I stepped off stage, he was standing there waiting, and the crowd moved around him like water around something fixed. You stayed, I said. I'm done leaving early. I looked up at him. Street lights catching the edge of his jaw and the ink climbing his neck, and the particular softness that only ever appeared on his face when there was no one else in the room but me. Say it, I told him. The real version, out loud. No folders, no gardenias, just you. He looked at me and every wall came down. I love you, Matilda. Quiet, certain, no performance. I have loved you since the first night you sang and made me want to become someone worth knowing. I smiled. That was all I ever needed. Drop a comment below. That's which moment hit you the hardest. The night outside her door? The photograph under her door? Or those final words? Tell me. I want to know. Subscribe and hit that bell. New stories every single week. We will see you in the next one.